Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Mark Andrew Holachek, Ukrainian American philosopher and historian, and author of a large number of books, some 70 books on various topics, five of which are on Ukraine. And I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Eye on Ukraine. Today, I'd like to follow up on something discussed in the last episode. We talked about Donald Trump's sustained conversation with Vladimir Putin several days ago, conversation that lasted over 2 hours. And Trump got off the phone and spoke of it being a very aidful conversation, that much good was accomplished. Of course, I tried to show that was not the case. It was just more Donald Duck rhetoric. His capacity to say what he considers to be the right thing at the right time, to placate Americans, to placate perhaps Ukrainians, in thinking that something positive is coming, that America is actually doing something to help the Ukrainian cause, doing something positive to end the war. As I've said before, the only way successfully to end this war is just to defeat Russia, defeat Putin. Putin will not tolerate anything less than that because his aim is conquest of all of Ukraine. He's painted into a corner. He's forced to do that because of his dire situation, the lack of money to conduct the war, the dire economic situation in Russia at the time. So, a few days ago with this area assault, some 367 missiles and drones were sent and fired upon the city of Kyiv. Some 12 people were injured. 12 people were killed, and many, many more were injured. And this was, in effect, Putin's response to Trump's pleas for peace, his pleas for a 30-day ceasefire and so forth. What was talked about on the phone, no one really knows. And it's hard to say, as I said before, I think what went on in that conversation on the telephone is that Putin was doing most of the talking and Trump was doing most of the listening, trying to gather information. It's an unfortunate scenario is that most of the information Trump seems to get about the war and about the history between Russia and Ukraine is through his Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin. And that seems to be a sorry excuse for a U.S. president. Should be doing his homework on these issues and trying to understand the situation from doing some reading. But of course, Donald Trump is not an avid reader, is not a big fan of reading. So what I want to do is I want to get at a recent post on Donald Trump's truth, right? And I'll bring this up and we can discuss this. All right, here we see there are several things said here, and I'll go through this and make some comments as I go through what Trump posts. He says, "I've always had a good relationship with Vladimir Putin of Russia, but something has happened to him. He's gone absolutely crazy. He is needlessly killing a lot of people, and I'm just talking about soldiers. Missiles and drones are being shot into cities of Ukraine for no reason whatsoever. I've always said that he wants all of Ukraine, not just a piece of it. Maybe that's proving to be right, but if he does, it will lead to the downfall of Russia." Let's just stop there. Let me, as it were, highlight that bit and to discuss that. He's always proud of having had a good relationship with Putin. I've talked about this in prior episodes, one of which is that Trump has had a history with the Russian government that goes back into the 1980s. And this is, without question, it seems, a financial history that Russia had bailed him out of some financial dire situations and so forth. And he's had a great relationship with Putin because I've said it. Another eye on Ukraine is that Putin says the right things to endear himself to Donald Duck. The most impressive thing, I guess, that Putin has said, he called on several occasions, called Trump a genius. And of course, a man with a limited IQ, Donald Trump, He's very flattered. Trump is very much taken by flattery. And the only way to get anything out of Donald Trump is to flatter him, right? To be sycophantic with him. And so he's always had, from his perspective, he's had a good relationship. So why does he think Putin has gone crazy? Because of these 367 missiles and drones showered upon it. Finally hit Trump that he's killing innocent people. Well, he was doing that from the very start of the war. So according to Trump, something has happened. Or Putin was a normal, sensible person conducting a war with a neighboring nation. But then all of a sudden, rather lately, something has changed him. What the hell has changed him? He's been the same throughout his presidency. He was a murderous dictator pretty much from the start, right? And the war in Georgia, 2008, his annihilation of Chechnya throughout the early years of his presidency are illustrations of that. He goes into Ukraine, Crimea, and the Donbass areas in 2014, right? So Trump doesn't seem to know anything about this. It's astonishing to me. So he wants all of Ukraine. I've always said that. When has he said that? To the best of my knowledge, he's never said that until this rant right here. Not a piece of it. It will lead to the downfall of Russia. What's going to lead to the downfall of Russia anyway? Russia has put all of its cards in the game of poker. It's like, I'm going all in. And when you do that and you find out that several other people at the table are calling you, you start to sweat. And that's Putin's current situation. His economy is tanking. His military has been suspect. He doesn't have enough ammunition, doesn't have enough military vehicles, tanks included, to conduct the war rightly. He's using donkeys and crippled soldiers at the front, motorcycles and so forth. So I don't get what he's saying. Let's look what he has to say about Zelensky. Likewise, President Zelensky is doing his country no favors by talking the way he does. Everything out of his mouth causes problems. I don't like it. It better stop. What precisely has Zelensky said that is irritating Donald Trump? Of course, he gives no example of what Zelensky has said. Notice everything out of his mouth. Every utterance is causing problems. What is he supposed to say? His country has been violated. There's been encroachment by the Russian military machine, the Great Russian Bear, and Zelensky's supposed to be absolutely quiet. Remember what Trump said about Zelensky earlier in April. He says he's always looking to purchase missiles. When you start a war, you've got to know you can win the war, right? You don't start a war against somebody that's 20 times your size and then hope that people give you missiles. I find this an extraordinary utterance. Again, an admission that Zelensky started the war. We go back to the root causes of the war. The root causes of the war, according to Putin, is NATO expansion. And as I cover in my book, Putin's obsession with Ukraine, the reason for NATO expansion, right? Finland lately, the Baltic nations prior to that, and so forth. These are all nations that were prior either threatened by Russia or part of the Soviet Union, right? And with the disintegration of the USSR, these are nations that claimed independence. They don't want to be under Russian yoke, and Putin wants them back under Russian yoke. Putin's even recently said that the USSR never really formally disintegrated, still exists. He uses any tact to justify his behavior, right? Now notice Putin behaves in a certain way. He aggresses, right? Trump is mostly empty verbiage. He talks. He does very little with respect to the war in Ukraine. He's an untrustworthy ally, if he's an ally at all. He's more an ally of Russia. All right, so, and lastly, if we look at this final quote here, This is a war that would never have started if I were president. How many thousands of times does he repeat this ugly bullshit? Claimed when he was running for presidency of the United States, he would end the war in one day. That hasn't happened, right? No one takes him to task for making false promises, right? He makes them all the time, right? His Trumpites, his minions, right? Just say, well, this guy is a genius. We don't know why he says what he says, but he's always got a deep-rooted reason, and it's always the right reason. The war didn't end in one day. The very fact that he makes the stupid claim is evidence that he doesn't know anything about the history of Ukraine and Russia, right? This is Zelensky, Putin's, and Biden's war, not Trump's. He's backing away. I have had nothing to do with this war. Biden started the war because of NATO expansion. Everything is always blamed on Biden. I'll leave it at that. Stop share. And what is fascinating to me is that as Putin finds himself increasingly in a desperate, roughly, or nearing a no-win situation, he ups his verbiage, right? When he talks about negotiation, he's open to negotiation. He's always wants to say with Ukraine, but he makes unbelievably unrealistic demands as an aggressor, right? As a country that has aggressed another country, and he makes these demands. Most recently, his demands are there is to be no more NATO expansion. In other words, Ukraine will never be part of NATO. It will be neutral. That's one of the important essential conditions for any peace talks. Ukraine cannot join NATO now or at any time in the future. What that is doing, Ukrainian neutrality, right, is something that guarantees that Russia at some future date can go in without the problem of Article 5, which says that an act against one country of NATO is an act against all others. He wants to be able at some future date when he can reboot, as it were, his mighty military machine and go back into Ukraine and take it at some future date when his military machine is again rejuvenated. So, I mean, this is strangely the sort of paradox. And to me, this is evidence of Russian vulnerability. The fact that Putin very lately, Peskov and other people are making these bold claims about Russia being able to hold on, sustain the war. I talk about endurance here. It's very, very important. Putin is very good at enduring. He is not a revolutionist, is why he was against the Bolsheviks. He is an evolutionist. He's willing to see Russia become great, and he understands that just like Peter the Great's war, Peter I's war with Sweden took some 21 years, but Russia finally won and decisively won that war. And if it just means that Russia has to hold out, the hope is, one, very importantly, that the United States will not intervene. He is hoping and counting on, and so far that is holding true, that Trump will just speak empty verbiage and do nothing. What can Trump do? He can impose heavy sanctions. He promised there's the threat of 500% sanctions against countries that are involved in the illicit exchange or trade of Russian oil, who get Russian oil at a cheap price to help Putin sustain the war. If those sanctions were put into place, the United States could do that. But the United States keeps saying, and Trump keeps saying, well, I need to hold off just to see if Putin's going to do anything. I don't know what the hell you're waiting for. You know, Putin has made these empty promises, all these pledges. All he's looking for is a delay. And why is he delaying? He's delaying to save his own ass. What I mean by that, the writing is on the wall, in my estimation, for him. He's going to be removed from power at some point, if not assassinated or killed. And everything he's doing right now is just to keep him in power for another day, another week, another month, perhaps another year. But the war can't go on for another year in its present. Only hope that Putin has is that, one, the United States stays out of any involvement in the war. That means sharing technology, which they're currently doing, and providing future military assistance. And two, he's hoping that um, European countries, this coalition of the willing, will fail to endure, that the people who are united because of Russia's actions will become at some point disunited or wearied by waiting and waiting and waiting. And at some point, there will be a sort of fragmentation of unity of European democratic nations. Those are the two conditions that Putin is hoping will be met. I don't see the second condition as a condition that will be met. But anyways, what I hope to show here is, again, we have more verbiage from Trump, no actions, no plan of action. He is a very not a proactive leader. He is a reactive leader, and we don't know what he's going to do on a daily basis. More than likely, it seems to me, and I've said this in the past, he's going to do nothing, and that is the great danger. But in that time that he does nothing too, I think the delay is beneficial for European nations as well. It gives them time. And delay is not something that is favorable to Russia in the long term. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please like it. Please share it. I will do more. And in future episodes, I will talk more about the culture and the history of Ukraine, especially if the war abates or if the war ends. Thank you. We'll do this again, TTFN.